Hello everybody, my name is Kyle39. Welcome back to another video. Today in this one is going to be another tier list video, and in this one it's going to be my tier list on the meta decks post December 2024 ban list. Yeah, it's actually been a while since I did one of these kind of videos. I think the last time I did this was way back in August, which is kind of surprising because I actually like making these videos because I just like talking about the Yu-Gi-Oh meta, which is, I know, surprising. A Yu-Gi-Oh player likes to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh. I know, call me crazy. I know, I'm crazy. But yeah, I say this is post-December 2024 ban list, but to be honest with you, the ban list doesn't really affect the meta that much with the exception of exactly 2 decks, which we'll talk about once we get there. But yeah, so our tier list rank is going to be tier 1, tier 1.5, tier 2 rogue, and then not this format. You really don't have to worry about this one. This used to be my like garbage tier list. I just don't like calling decks garbage now, so I'll just put them in not this format, but I don't think there's really going to be that much decks in this kind of ranking anyway, so I don't think you really have to worry about that, but that's what that is for. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the ranking, shall we? We'll start off with tier 1, which, yeah, unfortunately, tier 1, we're going to be talking about the best deck right now, is probably going to be Rizal, and this is obviously with the Fiendsmith Rizal as well. You want my honest opinion? I think the Fiendsmith Rizal is probably the better version of the two. I think I like Fiendsmith more than I do like Pier, but that's just because I love Fiendsmith in general, so you sold me on that. But yeah, this is very much probably the best deck right now. At YCS Anaheim, it was like 50%. No, it was maybe I think it was like 50%, somewhere around that range. It was the most dominant deck in the format. It won the entire YCS. The Fiendsmith version, Trift won it. But yeah, this is probably the best deck just because, you know, Detonator is really, really good. The fact that card's not a once per turn is fucking insane. Don't know what the fuck they were thinking. But also with the Fiendsmith stuff makes it where you can also set up on like a Desiree or a DDD to kind of play around Nibiru, the Primal Being as well. This deck is really, really good. The duo drive, being able to search the cross and the plugin or something, or even like a node as well, is very, very insane. The fact that this deck can play like 20 hand traps as well. This is kind of like the Snake Eyes of what Snake Eyes used to be, where you just play a shit ton of 1-card combos and then just throw in 23 hand traps as well. That's what this deck is there for, and obviously that's the reason why it's so good, because you can just do 4 hand traps and then just go 1-card combo and win the game that way. This is a really, really good deck. I'm not surprised. Now, to be honest with you, I don't think it's like a tier 0 deck at all. I think there is a competitor, which we'll talk about in just one second. So I really don't think it's a tier 0 deck, because there is a lot of things that this thing does die to. Being able to to negate the duo drive really does hurt, or even negating the Dead Natter on when your opponent negates the Dead Natter on their turn is really good as well. And that's kind of what the Fiendsmith is trying to prevent as well. But right now, it's probably the best deck in the room for sure. But I think the other competitor to this deck is, of course, the other new deck from Crossover Breakers, and that is Maliss. We actually have 3 versions of Maliss here. We have just pure Maliss, Maliss Striker, and where is Maliss Castria as well. You want my honest opinion? I think the Sky Striker version is probably the best, but Castria is still pretty much up there. If you want, I think pure is probably the worst version of it, just because the Striker and the Castria stuff help you at least break fields. Now, initially, a lot of people were on the Rizal stuff for YCS Anaheim, but I think the later we're going to move into this format and the more and more people pick up Maliss and start learning the deck, I think this is a real good competitor to Rizal, just because Maliss can do so much. But the problem with Maliss is obviously Lancia just straight up kills it in games 2s and game 3s, and I think that's the reason why you kind of have to play these like variants here, like the Strikers and the Castrias, because at least those will somewhat help you try to play through Lancia, while the pure version is probably like loaded up on lures and stuff. That doesn't mean like the pure version can't play like the parallel XCs and like the Cybers extenders that Cybers has a shit ton of. But again, I think this deck is really, really, really good. I made a deck profile earlier this week on it. If you want to check it out, I'll put in the link in the description down below. But yeah, I think this is really, really good. Being able to end on the Terahertz, this can randomly just make Nightmare Griffin as well, because the deck doesn't lock you out of Cybers, which is fucking insane as well. I think this deck, the more and more we get into the format, the more and more I think this is going to be more of a competitor to Rizal. I think it just wasn't showing that much at the YCS, because for the YCS, they're only legal for a day before, so not that many people were able to learn the ins and outs in the deck, while compared to Rizal's a lot easier to learn compared to what Maliss is. But again, this is really, really good. But yeah, these are probably your 2 best decks in the format. That is Rizal and then Maliss, and then whatever engines you want to throw in there as well for sure. So these are the tier 1 decks in my opinion. I don't really think anyone's going to disagree with that as well. Now on to tier 1.5. So this is kind of their like somewhat it's going to compete with tier 1, but you know, it probably has a little bit of a less favorable matchup. And I think for sure 1.5 goes for Yugioh, which I know is surprising because they just got Phantom limited, but I don't think that's that much of a problem. Like, yes, you can't make it where you can just make a Phantom, play around a hand trap, and then make a second Phantom, which is somewhat unfortunate, but it's still Yugioh. Yugioh's still going to end on a fucking crazy-ass field, and they're going to have the Phantom to at least play around a hand trap, right? So, and they also got opening the 3, which is doesn't seem that insane, but that's really, really good for the deck, because playing 3 opening is so much better than playing 3 Beckoning Beast, because Beckoning Beast is a normal summon that you can die to, while opening is somewhat of an extender as well, but it somewhat loses to draw as well. I think this is really, really good as well. The problem with Yugioh, and the reason why I've dropped it as a recent, is because Fuaros does straight up just kill this deck. If you have no out to the Fuaros, that is just going to kill Yugioh, which is unfortunate. But if Yugioh is able to set up on its full combo, it's really, really hard to break through, which is reason why it's so good. That's the reason why it was so good before these crossover breakers decks came out. But yeah, for sure, I still think it's a 1.5 deck. Another 1.5 deck I think is also going to be in here is Castria Fiendsmith. This was like a really good deck before the crossover breaker decks came out, but I think it's still pretty much up there as well. This is more a low to the ground deck where you just kind of expect to get hand trapped a lot, but you don't mind getting hand trapped because you can go Unicorn, Rip, and extra deck. And you still had like the Fiendsmith stuff, and you're still playing a shit ton of hand traps yourself. So this is more a low to the ground, not trying to combo as much, but still a very solid choice, and also being able to break fields as well. I think this also deserves to be in 1.5 for sure. And the other 1.5 deck I think also goes in here is Mermail. I think Mermail belongs in here as well. This is just a balls to the wall combo deck like Yugioh, which is end board is pretty much just unstoppable, which like there's really no way besides like a Dark Ruler, but even then they have the out to Dark Ruler. But the problem with this is Shifter kind of kills this deck, and the problem with that is Maliss can just main deck Shifter and just not care because they don't really care about their cards getting banished. Same thing with Rigel, they don't necessarily die to Shifter, and that's the reason why these decks are so good as well, because they don't necessarily die to Shifter. So, and this, you know, this very much dies to Shifter. Like, this is really impactful. Also, Nib is going more and more in format, but I think this probably has a way to play around Nib as well. This may be me be on the bottom, or like the top of tier 2. I'm going to put it at the bottom of 1.5 for right now, just because of its ability just to go wombo combo, you know? It's really, really good in this format for sure. Is there any other 1.5 decks I want to put in here? Looking at it, I don't think I do. Yeah, I'm gonna leave the 1.5 decks there. Now on to tier 2. We're gonna start off with Labyrinth. I think Labyrinth is really, like, honestly not a bad choice. I was nearly tempted to put it up here, but I don't know. I think a lot of people know what to do against Lab now. Like, obviously Ash is now everywhere in format, like way more relevant compared to what it used to be like over the summer. So yeah, for sure that pretty much dies to this. Impulse is now a card as well, which Maliss can play as well. Like it's just like, it's good because trap cards are good, and being able to like set a D-Berry against like a Rizal is going to be very, very good. But I don't know. I like a lot of people, like, it's just a trap deck. Like, I don't know. I'm a fan of Labyrinth. I really am a fan of Labyrinth, but compared to like the top decks, it still has an ability to play against the top decks. I think it's just a little bit worse off right now, but I think it's still a very solid choice if you would go that route. It's also a budget version. I think this deck is like really cheap right now, besides like the exception of maybe Chaos Angel, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, I think it's a really solid choice. Another deck in here I'm gonna put is, where is it? I just saw it. There it is. Memento. I think this is another also solid choice that can maybe be in 1.5 as well. Again, this is another deck that can also play Fiendsmith as well. But again, just like compared to what the top decks are doing right now, I think it's a little bit worse. But it's still not a bad option, being able to set up on its full end field with like, even with the Fiendsmith stuff as well. Being able to set the fusion, the Memento fusion, ending on the fusion that can pop cards on field as well. It's really, really insane what it can do, and also just a deck that can play a bunch of hand traps if it wants to as well. Not as many as the top decks, but still can play a decent amount of hand traps as well. But I think it just is a tier 2 deck for me. Anything else I want to put in tier 2? Yes, Fiendsmith. magical muskets. I think this is like in the same vein as the Fiendsmith Castria or Fiendsmith Castria. I think it's a little bit worse, but I still like this version of the deck a lot. It's still very, very competitive. I don't know. I'm trying to find a word for what I'm trying to say. It's very competitive still. I think it's just a little bit worse when you compare it to the decks above it. Like when I talk about like tier 1.5 and tier 2s, I'm not saying like this deck is objectively worse than this deck. I'm just saying this deck is still really good, but like it compared to the top decks, these top decks are probably going to win a little bit more compared what to the decks below it are going to do, but you can still very much compete with this deck. So even though I'm putting him lower on the list, I'm not like going to shit on, like I'm still going to say this deck can very much compete with the top decks. It's just going to have a little bit worse of a win rate compared to the top decks, but you can still very much still win with this deck. But I think this deck is very insane. It's kind of the same vein as the Castria Fiendsmith. I really do like this version a lot as well, but it's pretty much the same play style as the Castria Fiendsmith, and you have to play a little bit less engine or non-engine just because you're playing the magical muskets as well. Anything else I want to put in tier 2? Ritual Beasts. This is a weird choice now because the problem with this deck is one of the top decks don't care about Shifter anymore. So like your win con of sorts is now a little bit worse just because, okay, Maliss doesn't care. You're probably going to be helping them out anyways, and this is more of a board breaker, board breaker, or this deck can board break a lot as well. Same thing with Rizel, like Shifter sucks, but like still ending on like a 3 material Dead Niner is insane. That's still a problem that this is going to have a problem with. Like this is still a solid option just because nothing got hit with it, and Protoss is still Protoss, Colossus is still Colossus, right? And Shifter is obviously still Shifter, but I think it's just a little bit worse off now just because the top 2 decks don't really care about Shifter. Anything else I want to put in tier 2? No, I think that's maybe Centurion can go up here. I still somewhat like Centurion, but again, it's just a little bit worse compared to what the top decks are doing. I do like it a lot, but yeah, I just don't, especially like Bestials are coming into format too. Like, I guess this doesn't really get impacted by that. Like, this is cool. I do like it, but I don't know. I think it's just a tier 2 deck. Chimera. Chimera is the only other option I'm thinking. Do I put this in tier 2 or put this in Rogue? No, I think I'm going to put this at the top of Rogue. I think this deck is still very solid. Don't get me wrong. But the ability, like, it doesn't really have a way to play around Nibiru. It doesn't really have a way to play around Droll as well. Like, Droll does somewhat impact this deck as well, but I think still a solid option if you do play this as well. I wouldn't blame you for playing this as a really cool deck, but I don't think it's really as good as the top decks right now. Let's see, Fire King. This got way worse because OSS just got banned. So this is one of the decks that got affected by the ban list because OSS got banned, so we can no longer play that. Now I'm going to put this in Rogue. I'm going to put this a little bit lower in Rogue, so I'm going to put like a couple decks probably above it. But I still think it's there technically. Like the pure Fire King version still exists. You can still play like something like Tribe Gauge with it as well. So the deck isn't like completely dead, but like OSS does affect a lot. The fact that it can no longer play OSS does affect this a lot, but I still think it can be somewhat there if you find like the Tribe Gauge stuff and playing like more copies of Island and Sanctuary and stuff like that as well. So I still think it's a cool deck. I just don't think it's like there anymore just because OSS is banned. Rescue is cool. I think Rescue is probably better than Fire King. This is cool because it just got Airlifter back, but it also sucks because it lost OSS. So like they had to give or take. You lost OSS, but you also gained the second and third copies of Airlifter, which is cool. This deck is still really good. Being able to set 4 with the Turbulence is fucking insane. It's still cool, but like the OSS being hit does somewhat affect it. But I think the deck is still very, very solid as well. Just not as good as obviously the decks above it. Runic always goes into Rogue. I really fucking hate this deck, but Runic Stun is always just a fucking asshole. So yeah, this will always just go there. Goblin Bikers is pretty cool. The fact that now there's a top deck that's playing XYZ makes it where all the Goblin Bikers are now just extenders, because now you can just detach from their XYZ monsters, which is cool as fuck. But I'm not like, I think the deck is really, really cool. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it deserves to be like up here. I think Rogue is a solid option for it, for sure. Voiceless, I don't know. This has always just been a deck that I'm like, I feel like this deck should be able to do more, but it doesn't. So I'm just going to put it in Rogue. Like, a lot of people are still attached to this deck, but I honestly just like an Omni Negate plus the Cerebus, like, to negate a summon is cool, but like, fuck, bro. I don't know. I don't like where the deck is at right now compared to what other decks are doing right now. It kind of just fell off ever since like the 3v3 in Vegas. I think that's where it peaked, and it kind of just fell off from there. I like Ryujin as an engine. I don't really think... I'll talk about this in just one second. And Tempai is probably the last thing I'll put in Rogue. So this... Obviously, Chandra and Kaiman just got limited, so that very much impacts this deck like hell. It used to be like up here at 1.5 or even like tier 1, but with those hits, oh my god, it is just like fall off completely. Now, I'm not going to say not this format, because there is a lot of people still trying to do stuff, because necessarily all you need is just the one Chandra and the one Kaiman, and you can still OTK pretty easily. So you still just need that. You just have to figure it out. So I'm going to put it in Rogue for now while people still try to discover the deck, because I know a lot of people are trying to still figure out what Tempai is going to do in this next format. But I think the Chandra limit and the Kaiman limit does just impact the deck a lot, where it just falls to Rogue now. Now for not this format, Snake Eyes. I honestly don't know how it recovers. It lost OSS, and that was really the only thing it had left going for it. The fact that it lost OSS and Ash and Poplar are limited as well makes it where now you can't play Dia Bellstar as an engine because it doesn't bridge anymore. You can't play Azamina as an engine anymore because it no longer bridges to the Snake Eyes. And now you're like Bonfire is the only thing that's left for the deck, and Ash and Pop are only at 1. Now you can do some degenerate stuff. You could probably play like Melodious in this, because you can go Melodious, make a rank 4 into Banshee search for like a Poplar. You can't even search for Poplar. Then Poplar's like a lot worse now though, because Poplar can no longer search Ash. Like, that's like, I don't know. I think this is just now dead. I don't think there's really no way. I don't know. I think someone will probably figure it out how Snake Eyes is going to come back, but just looking at it, I don't think it's going to come back. I think it is just dead, unfortunately. Ryujin, I like this as an engine. I don't like this as a deck. So that's why I'm going to put it as not this format, just because as a deck, I don't think it's good. As an engine, I can like it as an engine. As an engine, that's where I think this is where it's at right now. Where as a pure deck, it's not playable. But as a engine in other decks, I think it's really, really cool. But it also has the ability to lose the Droll, which is everywhere right now, to be fair. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in not this format. And Millennium, I'm gonna put this in not this format. Now, the reason why I saved this for last is because I kind of have a story. So I was out with a couple of guys, or from locals, like at a Denny's, and the guy came and like helped to kind of help people because the regional was coming up for Albuquerque. So I was kind of helping people out with their decks, right? And this guy, he pulled up Millennium. He's like, "Can you just like play the deck?" He's like, "I know it's bad. Just help me play learn the deck and stuff like that." I'm like, "That's fine. I have to learn it on the fly, but I'll learn it." But every card I read, I'm like, this deck is like right there, but the fact that they made it where the fusion has to shuffle everything back fucking sucks. I think they just put that restriction. I think if they did not have that restriction, this would be like a really cool deck to play as an engine, and that's probably the reason why they made it as a restriction, because they probably didn't want to be played as an engine. They just wanted it to be a pure deck, which I understand, but oh my god, I hate the fact that they did that, because you can't just like make an IP and then activate the fusion, because IP is going to get shuffled back, which is fucking annoying. And the fact that you're playing 5 bricks in your deck in the Yugioh pieces also is kind of fucking annoying as well. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to save that as last. The fact that I was like learning the deck, I'm like, oh my god, this deck can be so cool if they didn't put that fucking shuffle all things on the fusion, which again, probably understand why, because they didn't want to make it as like an engine, but still, it just kind of sucks. So that is my tier list. I kind of went rambling there for a little bit for that last one. But yeah, tier 1, Rizal and Maliss, I think are probably the best 2 decks in the format right now. Tier 1.5, Yubel, Fiendsmith, Castria, and Mermail. I can perfectly understand the 2 balls of the wall combo decks in the format, and obviously the low control deck that's playing a shit ton of hand traps as well. Tier 2, again, Labyrinth, Memento, Fiendsmith, Magical Muskets. the Ritual Beast and Centurion, I think it's a perfectly fine list for tier 2. Rogue, I got the Chimera, Goblin Bikers, Rescue, Fire King, Runic, Voiceless Voice, and Tempai. And then the not this format is Snake Eyes, Ryojin, and the Millennium cards as well. So that is it for the video. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe for more content on the channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.